Hello and welcome to another episode of Virtue and Virtuosity. And this week I've got a couple of people here because I wanted to have a little bit of a three-way debate. And I think between us, we've got a lot of knowledge in this area. So I'm joined by Vince and Eleri. Maybe we can hear a little bit about both of you because you both got some interesting backgrounds. I'll start with Vince. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Vince Gratrick. I was, until recently, the Director of Digital and Technology at Age UK. Before that, IT Director at Mencap and United Response before that. So three big charities, effectively, for the last 16 and a half years. And before that, I was in the commercial sector for 14 years. So that's me.
Fantastic, Vince. That's a great background. And I remember, as we were saying when we were chatting earlier, that when I used to work at Shelter, we used to be around the corner from each other. And I always thought there were some great opportunities for collaboration between the two of us on tech. And when you were at Mencap, I was at Shelter. We've also got Eleri Morgan with us as well. Eleri, do you want to give yourself a bit of an introduction?
Hi, so I'm a specialist recruiter in the charity and non-profit sector. I work for Global Resourcing. We are a family-owned SME specialising in digital data and tech and looking at strategic talent partnering and how we can deliver the best for the customers in this space.
And I'll just say, Larry, Global are really well known in the leadership space within technology. And I remember about 8 years ago, I think it was the first time I came across you when I was applying for a job actually, and I was interviewed for it, and it was one of the best interviews in terms of getting information out of me I'd ever had, and that was why I was so impressed because it was Rob who was interviewing me, and he really understood technology, which really really impressed me. So since then, I've been happy to have a great relationship with Global.
Fantastic.
So today you might be wondering why we have a mix of an IT director and a recruitment person, a resourcing person. And the reason is because I wanted to talk a little bit about people today rather than technology. I wanted to talk all about how we've seen teams changing over the years, because in the last year or two, I think it's seen things change quite a bit. And I think in the next few years, things are going to change quite a lot. But I was first of all interested in looking back a little bit in the history of technology and technology teams and what we've seen, why it happened, and what we think happen in the future. So thinking first about what we've seen in the past. I've been in technology teams in the charity sector for at least 20 years, and I've seen a variety of different ways. But one of the first things I remember was I was in an IT team, and then the organization got a couple of people. This is going to show my age here. Got a couple of people in a web team to help build out a website, and IT worked with them, and that was great. But over the years, that web team then turned into a digital team, and we had some interesting collaborations there and a bit of healthy competition. And I don't know, Vince, if you saw anything similar in any of your organizations.
Yes, definitely. And often, particularly in the charity space, the digital teams are often linked very much with the marketing side of it, fundraising side. And so a variety in different events attended, and also within places like Age UK, where it's got a strong fundraising and marketing side to it. Those teams were merged. So was a merger of those teams at Age UK before I joined, and you could see the remnants of those differences between the teams over the years. And it depends again on the charities and the makeup of the charities of where those different teams are and sit. So for me at Mencap, that was a relatively small team because it didn't do a lot of fundraising. But yes, you had these different teams and different mindsets, and obviously that mixed in with different methodologies and approaches. So you got into the agile and the waterfall and the ITIL sort of ways of working, and the pace of change and the size of change. So definitely saw that and experienced that in my time. Yes.
And I think what I saw was that between the digital teams, the web teams, there was a common thing that IT and web and digital were all using computers to build stuff. I guess that was maybe one single area of commonality, but there was so much difference in how it was used, in what the audiences were, in what the tools and the techniques were. There was a lot of difference in approaches, and even what the overall driving outcomes, the objectives, the things you were trying to achieve, there was differences there. And that it makes me think, if you think 10 years ago when we had that program came out, the IT crowd, which I think has been the bane of so many IT directors' lives because it reinforced so many stereotypes. But if you think if the program was instead called the digital crowd, it would be a very different program. People traditionally who came from that web digital side of things were doing a lot more going out around the organization, a lot more collaborating in the past. But things changed, I think, and I've seen things really change. And I think IT really, really upped its game, because IT realized if we're going to have success with technology, many, many years ago, it was about being good at programming or being good at configuring servers, or a variety of back-end skills. But as time passed, it became more and more about collaboration skills, about being able to understand what was going on within the business, and less of that, especially when cloud technologies came along, less of that back-end skill set, which meant you needed different teams. And I guess, Vince, I'm interested. What did you see there in terms of your teams, maybe 10 years ago? How did they change?
I'm just pondering, so you were saying it and sort of picturing it. One of the things for me that was really apparent is when you talk about the skill set, the digital teams are very much focused on an external customer. So they were really interested in and they were therefore embedded often with the business themselves, because that's what the business did. They worked with the external customer. So IT teams were very much focused on the internal customer and providing the service to the staff, if that makes sense. And as I was pondering this, it's that the evolution that as IT and the consumerization of technology, that's, you talked about the IT crowd, but also we saw the consumerization happen in our space, that people had iPhones, they had laptops at home, that it became more common. We had to become more customer focused from an IT perspective. So I think that mindset shift, that shift in thinking about the customer focus, I saw that in the mindsets of certain people within the IT team, but also the digital teams, and where their focus was, where their attention and their skill set was. And sort of over time, I saw that merging a little bit into, it's all about good customer service, but where is your customer focused? So you still needed those skills within an IT team. You do have the back end tech, you still got your DevOps and your DevSecOps that still need to, absolutely crucial to do a good job, but they need to integrate well with those people that understand the business. So you got the product managers and you got business relationship managers and things like that. So that connection back to the customer is still really important. And that for me was one of the most important things of understanding your customer, albeit an external one or your internal one. Those are the key drivers, and that was necessary across any of the teams, digital, data, tech, whatever, all about customer focus.
Where for me it came to a head. So I remember I joined an organization in 2010. I had an IT team of something like, I don't know, 20 people or something like that, and all of them were technical. And I remember putting forward a business case to recruit a business analyst, and that was the first sort of non-technical role, someone who would go out there and talk to the business. And it felt really, really game changing back in 2010, that rather than just having an IT team filled with engineers, I was going to have someone who would actually talk to the business. That was only 15 years ago that position happened. But I think where for me things really changed was about, I don't know, 5 years later. I think that was about 5 years later when we started talking about really complex web applications, things that were for customers, but there was real complexity in what you were developing. So it wasn't a simple website that just, or even a form or something like that. It went way beyond that, and there was a whole load of complexity, but it was complexity that was driving a tool that was used by your customers rather than the internal staff. And then that suddenly threw up this huge question. Okay, is this a digital thing or is this an IT thing? And the answer, of course, was, well, it's a mixture. You guys are going to have to work together. You're going to have the people who understand the customers, the people who understand front-end design, UX, and all those sorts of things, working really well with the people who understand developing really good applications that work day in, day out, and store data in good structured ways. And that was really the big challenge. That I think that was really when it hit, that you had to have those teams working together. And I think that probably drove so much of the evolution in teams from that point onwards.
I'd agree with that. and I guess that's the part you're mentioning there, is that how those teams integrate, because it should be seamless from a user perspective. It's not seamless from organizational structures, hierarchies, management levels, reporting lines, and even then those teams themselves, because this is where your back end works with your front end, your product managers work with your architects. You mix in security, which became and has become so important. And my early experiences of working with digital teams is they hadn't considered some of the stuff that had actually been the bane of IT teams for years, which is change management, which is security, which is architecture, longevity, and the life cycle of some of the architecture and the infrastructure that went with it. So that their maturity of dealing with those issues, release management, albeit that's baked into product teams and agile sort of development, etc. It was a new concept, but getting those teams to work seamlessly and that handover, and now data's thrown into the mix of where the data design of those individual products that are built or those services that are built is so crucial. You're trying to basically then get teams to work well together as human beings. And that for me is where some of the complexity starts to come of the human element of teams.
Yeah. So the way we've gone from separate functions and then slowly we started to have to overlap and learn from each other. What you said about cyber and and change management and the different things we've learned from each other. The product approaches have definitely now that's embedded across all of it. And slowly I've seen all of that joined together. I guess what I'm then interested in is Eleri. You've been through recruiting through all of these changes, and now we've got to the stage where there is a lot. Teams are a combination of digital data, technology, often transformation as well. Is that now fairly standard? That combination of all of it bundled in together. Has that change happened? Do you think?
Yes, and I think it goes back what Vince was saying about what the wider organisation needs, who the customer is, and who they are, and then all those bits together. Once you start sort of collaborating across teams, you then see efficiencies in actually combining different skill sets together to create really optimum roles that are not just fitting a role that used to be, but a role that actually adapts and changes with the landscape that's changing, with the efficiencies that are needed, and what are those real skill sets that they need at that time to develop and move forward in the way that this function is looking to go. So it's the same as if you're going from hardware to cloud to apps and web apps and all of those different bits and pieces. You naturally, those job roles and the skills are going to adapt and change because you need to kind of pull the different bits and pieces together to create efficient roles within an organization. Otherwise, you'll have 10 people doing little bits of actually what one person can do themselves potentially.
And in terms of the leaders that you're involved in recruiting nowadays, what sort of leaders are you recruiting? Are you presumably you've moved on from recruiting IT leaders or people who manage websites? Well, maybe there are still people who manage websites, but what sort of leaders are you recruiting? What sort of skills are you seeing? What are the skills that people really want in those leaders?
I think there are many different ways to sort of look at it in the sense of it does really depend on what that organization needs and where they are and where they're trying to get to. But there are always those kind of key areas. They need someone who has that real strategic vision of where are we now? What are we actually trying to achieve? What are the actual issues or problems or challenges we're facing as an organization, rather than what are all those different trends that have been thrown around and, oh, that might be nice to do for a little while. But actually, what is the challenge this organization has and what are they trying to achieve? So somebody who can really have a holistic view across the organization, who sees outside of just their team, who is able to collaborate with the wider organization, but who can also, from a technical perspective, look at that sort of enterprise architecture that is in that team. How does that benefit the wider organization? How does that create efficiencies? And actually, how does that, in the longer term, save on cost and money if it's implemented well, if it's looked at efficiently, and the organisation are in it together? So it's having somebody who has those really technical skill sets across tech, data, and digital, but also can see past just their own sort of, I would love to do this, and look at what are we actually doing, what are we actually trying to achieve, and who ultimately are end users and what do they need.
What you've just described there, Larry, is very different to. So if I think back again, I'm using my historical context here, but think back 10 years. the job description for a head of IT or a head of digital or a head of data, what you've described is none of those things. It's something that's a whole bundle of new sets. Candidates have had to evolve over the years. The teams that sit underneath those people have had to evolve, and organizations have had to work with that evolution and update their job descriptions, come up with new roles that are required and everything like that. Have you seen that organizations have been good at that change? Because change is really hard. Have they managed to move along that journey? Have most people moved on from the head of IT or the I don't know, the head of web services or whatever it might be?
I would probably say no, not all. I think it does really depend on where the organization is at from an understanding that technology can enable efficiencies and actually in the long term again save on money, save on costs, save on time and create efficiencies. But unless you have that understanding that there is an investment to some level at the beginning to be able to get to that point, it's very, very difficult to move away from what has always been the norm. Because why would you invest in something if you don't understand that this initial investment in this process will actually save you money in the long term? Because you're seeing the cost of here and now, and that can be quite daunting. Um, on the other side of things, there are charities and organisations in this space who have got a really strong and diverse group of trustees that have different views, have got different experiences across technology. You have leaders who don't necessarily have a technical background, but do and have seen that technology can really create that really great impact. So when you have kind of that senior level collaboration and encouragement to be doing these things, then yes, you are seeing that change in the roles. You are seeing that there are different ways of working. You can, looking at moving away from that traditional piece to that working on a delivery model or a product mentality, and how that, is efficient and it works really well. But then there is that sort of fear sometimes that for change, there is an investment. It's not always monetary. It's a change in the ways of working. It can sometimes be a change in teams or how that team looks. It's a change of skill sets. And what does that mean for this team or that team, or all of those different pieces that come together? So I don't necessarily think you can say the whole the whole remit has changed. I think it's more of a, what is the understanding of the benefits of an individual organization for these changes and how have they embraced them that make the key differences there.
So there's a lot you put in there, and I thought that was really interesting. I'm going to picture myself. So now imagine I'm a chief exec or a chief operations officer, or someone like that, and I'm trying to evolve my team structures all around technology, data, digital. Do I have a group of trustees or a trustee, or do I have someone on the trustee board who can help me make that change and make that shift? And I think the chances are quite a lot of charities, the answer will be no, we don't. So they are trying to work out, okay, what should we do with data and digital and technology? What is the way we should go with it? How do we get from where we are now to where we need to be in the future? And I guess if you don't have that group, and so one of my hobby horses here is that a really great tech advisory group or something like that as part of your trustees is worth its weight in gold. If you can manage to get one of those things, so as you can give guidance to your executive on a variety of different technical issues, that's brilliant. But if you don't have that, presumably then you get people coming to organizations like yourself, Larry, saying, listen, we're trying to restructure, change what we're doing. Is that what happens? Do people come to you and ask you, how should we be doing it?
We have a number of sort of conversations with customers on a basis of, ultimately, how can we help you, and what do you need support with? And it will often be conversations of, this is what we're really trying to do in this function, but the challenge is that no one really sees that benefit. And we can discuss sort of how we help and support that leader in the tech team, for example, to present these things in a good way, to present how this benefits and what the change in cost and all those different things can be. But unless you have that ultimate sign off from the board and the chief exec, there isn't anywhere to go. And what has been really great is we've worked with a number of charities and have had conversations with a number of charities and the leaders in those charities from a technical perspective, that when they have an individual on the board who is a credible digital data and tech leader from, credible organizations, big organizations that people know in the wider board, will then go, they must know what they're talking about because they've done all these things previously at a great scale, etc., with almost unlimited resources, which can also be the challenge too. But that sort of credibility and support for the board, but also for that C-suite or that IT leader who is trying to say these things are really important because of X, Y, and Z, to have that sort of support at board level rather than having to convince constantly, but to have someone say, actually, we've done that before and it did this, or that would work really well because of X, Y, Z. It's combining those two credible leaders, one of which is within the charity and one of which is, is part of that board and has been invited to be part of that board, that gives that option and opportunity a bit more encouragement. But then looking at, again, organizations who have tech committees, for example, and Stuart, a couple that, that I'm referring to, is the ways that they are working and their teams are developing and the outputs of what they're able to do, they're not always, really, really top end, blow your mind technology pieces, but it's really efficient. It's really strong technical transformation journeys because they've got the right people in place, because there are peers, albeit not directly in the organization, but peers who are encouraging and supporting and looking at different ways of working. A lot of the time, IT tech, digital data tech leaders in this space are often almost sole contributors because they don't have that peer group around them to kind of work together and throw ideas off. So yeah, often we do have people who just want to talk through how do we get to this sort of position and be able to demonstrate this. So the wider piece there is really, really critical.
As a tech leader, it can be a lonely job. I think that's what you're saying in there somewhere. I think, which to a degree, and Vince is smiling as well. So what you just described there is how over the last 10 years, the operating model all around technology, data, digital has changed in many organizations. And if you want to keep up with that change, it's really good to understand what advice you're getting and who you're getting that advice from at a very senior level, perhaps pairing people internally with trustees or external advisors can be really helpful. We know that going forward in the next 10 years, it's also likely to change. And so I think that's what I'm interested in. What will the next 10 years hold? There's a big question. AI is all over everything. Now, you can't go through a podcast without talking about AI, or I certainly can't. And where's that going to sit in an organization? How do we gear ourselves up as organizations so that we can get those decisions right around the operating model around technology, including AI in the future? And that's such a difficult question, which Vince is sitting there thinking about. I'm just going to say, what have you got any thoughts, Vince?
So always thoughts and always opinions on this stuff. It's fascinating because, and I think Stuart, we might have spoken about this before. Is it the C-suite piece where you've got now potentially chief AI officers going on there, and at one point it was a chief data officer, at one point it was a chief digital officer, and then you've got CIOs, CDIOs, you've got all of these things. And what's quite fascinating is you can't have all of them crowding around. You're trying to cram it into one person. But what's quite interesting is how what it's demonstrating is that it's so essential for any organization to get all of these pieces right, to get the infrastructure, the tech right, the systems and the processes and the people right, because AI fits across everything. It can seep into everything. It's not one specialism or area. Just like security, interestingly, from the CISO side of things, is not just about the security reporting and auditing. It's how do you bake that into the design of your organization, your processes. So I think it's a fascinating challenge that's emerging, mixed in with the pace that AI is seeping into. They're so revolutionary and so disruptive for technology of pace. How organizations deal with AI I don't think it's a single position on an exec. I don't think it's a single directorate anymore or function, because it can be beneficial for every single part of an organization. I think that coordination through that C-suite probably is through somebody that sits in that space, who, that individual that holds the pen for all of those areas or represents it. Pulling that together is probably where it sits. But it's a crowded space, CIOs, CISOs, you name it, because it's so vital to an organization. And going back to Ileri's point, this is where it's quite interesting for me in my history and time in the charity sector, of the representation at that exec level hasn't traditionally had technology, or it's seen as an IT thing. It hasn't had those people at that level. It's had the people team, people, HR before that, finance. But now any organization consists of three parts. It's the capital, which is finance. It's the people, which is HR. And then it's the technology, digital and data side of it, of which AI fits. That often doesn't sit at that board level. And even the transformation teams that come in, that's a transient thing. Transformation is going from A to B. For me, it's important that you have somebody there all the time thinking about this and pulling all those strands together. So it's a fascinating challenge coming in. I don't know if that answers the question, Stuart, or it creates more questions for you, but it's a lot of pressure coming through the use of AI now, because no one has the answers at all.
So it does answer the question, and there's a lot of pressure coming in and a lot of change coming our way. And in organizations within the commercial sector, they are investing a lot of money in these changes and trying to make sure that they get it right. In the charity sector, things are slightly different, because charities are not organizations who are cash rich, who are sitting on large pots of money that they can experiment and try and make sure they're getting it right, invest huge amounts in technology, AI, etc., etc. I guess I'm curious a little bit on how well set up we are for this, Eleri, from a recruitment position. Have you seen that charities are expanding their investments in people around technology and digital data? Are they shrinking them? What's that market looking like at the moment?
In terms of what the recruitment landscape looks like at the moment, I would say there's been an awful lot of changes in terms of, we are in a space that's always going to be financially challenged. There's always going to be new technologies, new ways of working. And again, it goes back to the point of, where is that organization now, and where are they trying to get to from a technology perspective, and then a wider organizational way of working and their operating model. But where these significant financial challenges have come in and keep coming in, and especially around the national insurance piece this year in particular, organizations are having to kind of look internally for those cost saving areas. So they're looking at efficiencies, they're looking at teams, they're looking at duplications of systems and legacy systems that they've just used forever, but are they actually providing the best output or the best impacts that they need to be doing? So one of the areas that we're seeing more often than not is actually having a wider holistic view of that tech team with leaders. So rather than historically, you'd have someone call you up and say, "Hey, we're going to go down this route. We need you to help us find a head of digital to do X, Y, Z," for example. What we're finding now is we're having conversations and going, we have this team. We need to deliver on this. We want to be changing and transforming continuously to ensure that we are always operating in an efficient way. However, we need to find cost savings. We need to be able to make streamlined teams. And what you are seeing is sitting down and looking at those functions. Well, this function here are operating at BAU now, but they were actually there to implement a CRM, for example, maybe last year. But these people are really highly skilled and probably paid quite a lot of money to be doing BAU when they were actually in to do the kind of core implementation pieces and the really sort of technical setup side of it. Do you need these people at that level to be providing that continuous sort of maintenance of that area? Or what are you doing here? How can you develop this team here? For example, PMs is a really common one. There's always been PMs that are managing various different projects, but then we're now looking at that more efficient way of working. So again, it depends, the delivery of the product way of working that incorporates wider parts of the organization. So can you upskill those people? The team you have, can you upskill them? Can you look at where you want them to be at this point, and can you upskill those people? Yes, there's always going to be new roles and new sort of skill sets that aren't in that team. And yes, so you do see new sort of opportunities coming through. But what that looks like at this moment in time is we're reviewing teams and how they are set up. Are they in the best place? Doing skills gap analysis, target operating models. Stuart, you've probably seen plenty of these in the last few months, but those sort of areas is that's what I'm seeing an awful lot at the moment, is partnering with these organizations to look at, do we have an efficient team as we are? Is it fit for purpose, and is it fit for the way we're moving forward? Because as soon as you have we need to do cost saving, we need to save money, the answer isn't always cut in half your team, because you still need to deliver what you need to deliver. You need to get through that transformation again for the long term, to have that impact, to allow that organization to continuously improve in an efficient way.
Wow. There was so much you said in there. What I've picked up is that you need to be able to keep the lights on, which is always the challenge with technology, that you can't just like stop everything you're doing, give up on that and do something new. So you need to be able to keep that ongoing business as usual going, but you also need to free up some money somehow to invest in this change, because everything you just told me has said it's inevitable. There's going to be a large amount of change in the way that technology, data, digital, AI, all these things are delivered in the coming years, and you need to get the right mix of resources, the right target operating model to actually deliver that. And if you're going to do that, you need to somehow work out how you're going to free up money to invest in that change, which is going to be so difficult for charities, because that's like every finance director is the headache of every finance director is, okay, we want to invest in the future, but we've got all of our on costs, which we can't just like slice 5% off everyone, because that's just going to break everything. What's the vertical that we can remove to free up the money to invest? A really difficult position. Vince, have you got any thoughts on any of that?
I've got tons, and we would probably run out of time. And you might want a separate podcast about how charities think about the cost of doing business and what the IT costs are, because that BAU question it was a fascinating one for me, because the cost to run an organization now should incorporate a huge amount of digital data and tech, because as I said before, that's essentially how a lot of charities are digital businesses without appreciating they are a digital business. They've got a lot of human capital, but now in a modern business, that human capital is operating digitally, whether they know they are or not. They have a website, they have advice lines coming in, that they're digital assets that need to be organized and ran effectively. So those traditional approaches to how you cost a business and the cost to run a business need to be understood beyond those silo thinking that tends to happen at boards of, well, let's just cut the IT costs, the back office costs, let's focus on the shiny digital, the new CRM. That goes back to the roles that we were talking about, is somebody who understands holistically how it all fits together, not just from the tech side, but how that fits together across all the different business units. And I see the silos within different business units not necessarily holistically working well together either. And the damage that can occur there is you see one area of an organization get a lot of money invested, often fundraising, because that's the one that generates the cash, not thinking about the cost that's been taken away from a different part of the business that's integral to deliver the data for that fundraising area, or potentially the services that area provides that helps generate a good service, what the charity provides, which then generates the funds because of the reputation. And IT sits amongst all of that. And I say IT in the holistic sense. So that's the digital data and tech. So it's a fascinating thing about how charities see themselves and that back office costs, and even that term of back office costs, because there is right. The cost pressure is there, what do we cut? And it isn't your traditional route for me that you cut. You need to be thinking broader about that, not just the old tech. We've got 5 people on the service desk. Let's chop it down to 3, or let's get rid of these 3 techies, or let's outsource something that you lose the control over what is now the crown jewels of your business, because you suddenly lost control of something that is all your data and your processes and your people and your expertise. But I say that's probably a whole different podcast, Stuart. And you might want to bring somebody on from finance to talk about that, because there's a really important relationship with finance and technology that if you get it right, they understand the value of technology as well.
Yeah, I think there is a whole different podcast there. I'll also say I'm amazed that the front office, back office argument still goes on, because front office typically means people, and back office often includes all the technology things. But as we've talked about digital, and as we've talked about in the future what AI can do and everything like that, that's pushing technology into the front office, and so it all gets very complicated. We've talked for a long time, and this has been really, really valuable. I'm going to try and wrap it up, but I wanted to just finish with a question. So we've talked a lot about these leaders for the future, all about how they change from being the head of IT, the head of data, head of digital in the past, and to these future leaders, what they look like, the people who will sit over the AI and the transformation, the data, the digital, that will help the organization, the people who can drive an organization forward. What do you think would be the skills, and just a few words on this? What do you think the skills are needed in those sorts of people? What are you seeing in those future leaders? What do you think it would be?
When we are looking at the future, I think it again is having somebody who has the empathy to understand the wider organizational need, the difficulties and challenges that they have, but being able to demonstrate the value, coming in with a credible, empathetic view of, we are doing this because of X, Y, Z, that brings that kind of trusting piece around, we are doing this technology change because of the long-term view, because of that, but also being able to set the organization up for the longer term, not just implementing something because it's the trend at the moment, or wouldn't this be great? It may help us, but actually everybody's doing it, so let's us do it as well. It's thinking about, what does this organization actually need? What is going to be that piece that brings efficiencies and great ways of working and simplicity and allow for future change? So thinking past these heavily, heavily bespoke systems sometimes and looking at, actually, is there a better way of working? Is there a way that we can do it, that we can work and change and adapt efficiently without having to do a huge transformation every 3 to 5 years, because now this is out of date? It's that future horizon scanning and looking at, this is where we're at, this is what the organizations need, this is what myself and my function can bring to this, but bringing in that real sort of wider view of technology and how it changes, understanding the organizations and they need, but also being able to present that in a way that the non-technical stakeholders are able to get on board with, can trust, and can see that actually this is a really great way moving forward. And I think it's about, again, being quite open to that.
There was so much in there. Vince, do you have anything to add to that? That was a long list.
It was, I mean, and I think it's probably one of the most challenging roles you can have these days, is a senior level, because you have to be everything to everyone. It's also something that I think future COOs and CEOs will emerge from, because I think you have to have a really good understanding of how a business works, that translation skill that Eleri talks about, but also an understanding of how all those systems fit together. So I think you've got to have somebody that's got a very system thinking, holistic, architectural thinking to some extent. But as it evolves and the technology seeps into everything we do, I think they're going to become more business focused, more business skills, and you will have then trusted teams amongst those that cover some of the AI and the data, etc. So this will become, as businesses evolve into digital businesses, then it will become a more business focused role. And that's your politicians, your diplomacy, your change management, your sales focus. So I think this will evolve into a far more business focused role, and potentially people coming from outside of the tech stack route to become the leaders of that function over time.
Also because, we're seeing more of that change, right? So the tech team as a whole is being incorporated, and it's being encouraged to be incorporated with the wider organization. So naturally, you're then going to have leaders who have more of that business focus too. So yeah, exactly right.
There was so much to it. I took a few notes as you were saying it there. I picked out skills for the future leaders in our organization that are around tech. Trust, empathy, broader organizational view with technology knowledge and business skills, ability to see through the noise, to speak everyone's language, systems thinking, architectural knowledge, diplomacy, and change management. If you're sitting at home thinking, I've got all of that, my God, you're going to make a fortune in the coming years. But I think what we're going to really have to do is build our existing leaders to get those skills, because that's as you said, Vince, it's one of the hardest jobs. Getting someone who can do all of that is going to be really difficult, and that's why final bit and another plug for Eleri here is why need some really good people out there who can help us recruit these great people with this broad range of skills, which is going to be so hard in the future. I think I'm going to wrap up there, but that's been absolutely fascinating. Big thanks to both Vince and Eleri. It's been brilliant having you on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Always lovely to speak to you both. So thank you so much for having me as well.